It was Saturday night, December 4th, 1971, at the Long Beach Arena in California. The International Karate Championships, the largest martial arts event in the United States, had just come to a close. Throughout the day, 3,000 spectators filled the stands to watch the action. Athletes traveled from all over the country, including New York, Texas, Florida, and Illinois, to take part. The floor was crowded with experts from every major discipline, such as Taekwondo, Kenpo, and various styles of karate. They were all there for the same reasons: to earn respect, take home a trophy, and prove they were the best in their field. The official tournament was finished, and the winners had already received their prizes. While the audience began to head for the exits, something significant was still happening behind the scenes. In a quiet meeting room away from the main arena, the post-event press conference was getting underway. This was a normal part of the tournament. The winners would sit down with sports reporters to talk about their victories and help get the story into the Monday morning papers. The setup was modest. About 50 journalists from local newspapers and martial arts magazines sat in rows facing a long table equipped with microphones. The mood was serious and professional. At the center of it all was Jim Kelly. At 24 years old, Jim was an impressive figure, 6 feet tall, fit, and wearing a confident smile. He was still in his white karate uniform with his black belt tied around his waist. Hanging from his neck was a gold medal he had just earned as the middleweight champion. He had dominated every match that day with incredible speed and perfect technique. Both the judges and the fans were blown away by his performance. Sitting next to him was Ed Parker, the founder of the tournament and a legendary figure in Kenpo karate. Ed was acting as the moderator, keeping the session organized. He signaled to the reporters that they could begin asking questions. A reporter from the Los Angeles Times stood up. "Jim Kelly, congratulations," he said. "Your speed today was remarkable. People are already debating who the fastest fighter in the country is. We often hear Bruce Lee's name mentioned in that conversation. Do you believe you are faster than him?" The room suddenly went silent. It was a bold question that put the new champion right on the spot. The tension in the room was thick. Bruce Lee wasn't competing in the tournament, but his reputation was everywhere. People spoke in hushed tones about his legendary feats. Doing push-ups on only 2 fingers, his famous 1-inch punch, and hand speed so fast that standard cameras couldn't even record it. By asking Jim to compare himself to Bruce, the reporter was essentially asking him to challenge a legend. Jim didn't hesitate. He leaned into the microphone with a wide grin. "I don't just think I'm faster. I know I'm faster. Bruce Lee is very talented, but I've spent 8 years in the ring. I've been winning tournaments and fighting under real pressure. I am the fastest martial artist in the country. Period." The room exploded into a flurry of activity. Reporters scribbled notes as fast as they could, smelling a front-page headline. While some were thrilled by the drama, others looked uneasy. They knew Bruce's reputation and wondered if Jim had just made a huge mistake. Ed Parker, the tournament organizer, shifted uncomfortably. He was a friend of Bruce's and knew he was actually in the building somewhere watching the event. Ed tried to smooth things over. "Well," Ed began, "there's a big difference between tournament fighting and a demonstration." Suddenly, Ed was cut off. A man stood up at the very back of the room. He was a lean figure, about 5 feet 7 inches and 135 pounds, dressed simply in black trousers and a black turtleneck. It was Bruce Lee. He had been sitting in the shadows, listening to every word. The room erupted in whispers as Bruce began walking toward the front. "That's him. That's Bruce Lee," people hissed. The journalists swung their cameras around, capturing the moment as Bruce calmly climbed the steps to the stage. He walked straight over to the table and stood right next to Jim Kelly. Bruce didn't look angry or aggressive. His face was perfectly calm and neutral as he looked at the man who had just claimed to be faster than him. The room fell into a heavy silence as Bruce Lee spoke. His voice was quiet, but it reached every corner of the room. "Jim," Bruce said calmly, "you just told 50 reporters that you know you're faster than me. Would you like to prove it right here, right now, in front of everyone?" Jim's smile vanished. His body went rigid. This wasn't how a victory celebration was supposed to go. He had just been publicly challenged on the biggest night of his career. Ed Parker stood up quickly to intervene. "Gentlemen, perhaps this isn't the right time or place," he suggested, trying to keep the peace. But Bruce gently raised a hand. "It's all right, Ed. Jim made a claim, and claims should be tested. That's the only honest way to do it." He looked directly at Jim. "What do you say, Jim? Let's see who is really the fastest." Jim's mind was racing. He knew he was in a corner. If he said no, the morning papers would say the champion was afraid to face Bruce Lee. His reputation would be ruined before the ink was even dry. He had no choice but to agree. "Yes," Jim nodded. "Let's prove it." The room became a blur of motion. Ed Parker pushed the chairs aside to create an open space in front of the stage. Reporters stood on their tiptoes, cameras ready. This was actually happening. Jim took off his gold medal and placed it on the table. He stepped into the clearing where Bruce was already waiting, looking completely relaxed with his hands at his sides. "How do we do this?" Jim asked. His voice sounded steady, but his heart was hammering against his ribs. "Simple," Bruce replied. "Try to hit me. Use your fastest move at full speed. I will respond, and we'll see who is quicker." "Just strikes, no wrestling," Jim clarified. "Just strikes," Bruce agreed. "A pure test of speed." Jim dropped into a classic karate fighting stance. This was what he was best at. He had won dozens of trophies with his lightning-fast reverse punch. It was his signature move, the same one that had made him a champion just hours earlier. Jim gathered his energy and launched his best punch. His right hand shot forward with perfect form and incredible power. It was the fastest he had ever moved. In an instant, Bruce's left hand blurred. He intercepted Jim's wrist just 6 inches from his face. With a light touch, he redirected the blow, and Jim's fist sailed harmlessly past Bruce's head. A total miss. Jim reset his stance, stunned. He prepared to try again. Jim tried a different approach, firing off a quick, snapping jab. But the result was exactly the same. Bruce's right hand met him halfway, lightly redirecting the punch into thin air. Jim's focus sharpened. He knew his own speed was elite, but Bruce wasn't just blocking. He was intercepting. Bruce was catching the punches while they were still in motion, which meant he was reading Jim's mind before the strikes even landed. Changing tactics, Jim tried a spinning back fist. It was a circular move with different timing meant to catch an opponent off guard. He spun with everything he had, but as his fist arched toward its target, Bruce's hand was already there, waiting at the exact point of impact. He stopped the rotation cold. The move failed. Growing desperate, Jim unleashed a rapid-fire combination. A jab, a cross, and a hook. These were championship-level strikes delivered at a blistering pace. Bruce's hands moved in a fluid, continuous blur. Left, right, left, guiding every single punch away. 3 strikes, 3 misses. Jim had used his best weapons, and not a single one had even come close. Bruce spoke quietly. "You are very fast, Jim. You have the speed of a champion, but you are relying on rehearsed patterns. I am responding to your intent. I see your decision before your hand even moves." Then Bruce moved. It wasn't a hard punch, just a light tap with his fingers against Jim's chest. It was a gentle touch, but the meaning was terrifyingly clear. If Bruce had wanted to, he could have ended the fight right there. Jim had left himself wide open during his combination, and Bruce had chosen to show him the gap rather than exploit it. Bruce stepped back and lowered his hands. "You are the champion, Jim," he said. "You earned that medal. Your speed and skill are the real deal, but there is a huge gap between winning a tournament and true combat awareness." He explained that while Jim trained to score points and impress judges with perfect form, Bruce trained to end a fight instantly. They were playing 2 different games with different goals. "Neither is necessarily better," Bruce added. "They are just different." The room remained frozen. The 50 journalists sat in total shock, their cameras still rolling. Jim stood in his fighting stance, breathing heavily. It wasn't because he was tired, but because his mind was reeling. He had just thrown his 5 best, fastest strikes at a man who barely seemed to move, yet he couldn't land a single blow. Bruce had used the smallest possible movements to brush his attacks aside before touching him to prove he was vulnerable. Slowly, Jim stood up straight and relaxed his guard. The arrogance was gone. In its place was a newfound sense of respect and deep curiosity. He reached out his hand to Bruce. "I was wrong," Jim admitted. "You are faster. Or like you said, you're earlier. I don't quite understand how you did it, but I felt it. I couldn't touch you." Bruce shook his hand firmly. "You could hit almost anyone," Bruce reassured him. "You are incredibly talented. Just don't mistake winning a trophy for reaching the end of your journey. There's always more to learn, and there is always someone who sees the world differently." Jim nodded, his mind already turning toward the future. "Would you teach me?" he asked. "I want to understand that timing and that awareness." Bruce thought about it for a moment. "I can show you the principles," he replied, "but you'll have to be willing to question everything you think you already know. You have to unlearn your old habits before you can learn new ones. Can you do that?" Without a second of hesitation, Jim agreed. "I have to," Jim replied. "After seeing that, I need to know how it's possible." Bruce reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to the young champion. "My school is in Chinatown. I'm there Tuesday evenings. Come only if you are truly serious." Jim looked down at the card. "I'll be there," he promised. Bruce gave a respectful nod and turned back to the crowd of reporters. "Thank you for your time. Congratulations again to all of today's winners." With that, he walked off the stage and left the room as quietly as he had entered. Jim stood there in the center of the room with 50 sets of eyes on him. He looked at the card in his hand, then at the gold medal sitting on the table. Suddenly, the medal didn't feel quite as significant as it had an hour ago. He had won the tournament, but he had lost a test he didn't even know he was taking, a test that showed him how much he still had to learn. Ed Parker walked over and placed a hand on Jim's shoulder. "Don't let it get to you," Ed said kindly. "Bruce does that to everyone, even the best in the world. He isn't trying to embarrass you. He's trying to teach you." Jim shook his head. "I don't feel embarrassed. I feel like I've finally woken up. I thought I was the fastest man around, but it turns out I was measuring the wrong thing." True to his word, Jim Kelly walked into Bruce Lee's martial arts school in Chinatown the following Tuesday. Bruce saw him and smiled. "You actually came?" "I said I would." For the next year and a half, Jim trained with Bruce twice a week. He learned concepts that weren't taught in standard karate classes. He learned how to read an opponent's mind, how to stop a move before it even started, and how to focus on timing rather than just quick reactions. Jim kept competing and kept winning, but his skills had reached a completely different level. His speed wasn't just about fast hands anymore. It was about a deep, quiet awareness. By 1973, everything was about to change. In 1973, Bruce called Jim with an exciting offer. "I'm making a movie called Enter the Dragon," Bruce told him, "and I want you to be a part of it." Jim accepted immediately. They worked on the film together, turning a friendship that began with a tense 17-second public challenge into a powerful professional partnership. When the movie was released, it became a global sensation, turning Jim Kelly into an international star. For the rest of his life, whenever people asked Jim about his success, he didn't just talk about his trophies. He told them the story of that night in December 1971. He talked about the moment he claimed to be the fastest in the world, only to be proven wrong in less than 20 seconds. He didn't view that moment as a failure. Instead, he saw it as the most important lesson of his career. He realized that being wrong was actually the first step toward becoming truly great. The story of Jim Kelly and Bruce Lee isn't just about physical speed. It's about the wisdom to stay humble. Those 17 seconds taught Jim that mastery isn't a finish line you cross. It's a lifelong path.